Gainesville, June 27th, 1862. Going to take a little detour into the Civil War using Worthington's Civil War Brigade battle series from the 7 Days Battles. This is the Gainesville map. 7 Days Battles, it comes with, well, actually, I'll show you. 7 Days Battles. Comes with 2 mounted maps of this size. Both are double-sided. You've got 4 scenarios in here, single map scenarios, and then you can actually link 2 maps together on both sides for 2 combined scenarios to play out sort of like the battle contiguously over a long period. You can see the turn track down here goes pretty far. We are starting on June 27th at 3 p.m., and we are going to play up until the 8 p.m. turn. And we have got the Confederates moving in force against this Union position to try and cross the Chickahominy River, or what I assume is what they're trying to do, given that the victory point hexes are the roads that lead across the Chickahominy River. I don't know anything about the history of the Battle of Gainesville, nor do I know anything about the 7 Days Battle. Civil War, not my historical strong suit, but I love Civil War games because they're usually really interesting. And I really like Worthington's Civil War Brigade battle series from what I have played so far. This is, when this came out, this is using rules version 1.3b. They're up to 1.4, so I'm going to be using those. The one thing that is not in here, unfortunately, with 1.3b is the melee modifiers for the different terrain. So I have gone and looked at the Gettysburg terrain effects chart to see what the melee modifiers are, and I put a red cube to show what the minus value is on the dice. Woods are -2 in melee. Stream, -2 in melee. Swamp, I think this is the only game in the series that has swamp terrain, so I don't know what it is, but given that everything else is -2 to melee, we're going to go with -2 to melee. I assume that if you wade into a swamp to try and get in close with someone, it's going to go very badly for you. So that's how we're going to do it. If you watch my other video on Civil War Brigade Battle Series, that was from Via Victus. That was Cedar Mountain, I believe. Yeah, I think it was Cedar Mountain. That would show you all the rules to this game. It's a very simple system. 1 player aid, combat charts here, fire range. Basically, it's I go, you activate your units, you move them, you attack with them, you conduct melee, and then it's the other player's turn. So it plays pretty quickly, pretty simply. There's a lot more units here than there were in Cedar Mountain. And I still haven't yet finished setup because I need to put the commanders with their formations. I have to decide where I want to put them. They give a little bit of bonus. In general, the way the game's going to go, Confederates are going to press in here against the Union. On turn 1, it's only going to be A.P. Hill, his division, is going to move in. Each of these counters is a brigade. We're going to engage in some combat. Then the Union will get to go, and then we'll get to move everyone. We've got some Union reinforcements showing up on turn 1 and turn 3 of the scenario. And so we're going to have to put those to good use because it looks like the Union's about to get overrun, given that Stonewall Jackson is coming down this road with his corps while the sort of front lines here make an advance. The Union probably going to have to figure out what to do about this line of advance coming south. I don't know that they can hold that. They might, yeah, it's going to be, it doesn't look like a good position from the start, so I'm going to assume that the Union lost this battle, but I guess I should go look up the history before we start. So, yeah, I guess this is where we begin. I've gone ahead and set up the leaders where I want them. A couple other special rules I should mention real quick before we start. These 3 divisions up here, Whiting, Winder, Ewell, every Confederate turn they have to roll a d10. If they roll 5 or less, none of those units are moving. So the outnumbered situation, that reflects Jackson's performance in this battle from his command. So it's really 3-on-3 to begin with, although the Confederates outnumber the Union here. I did look up the history. Should probably do that every time I play a game. And it was a narrow Confederate victory, although not the overwhelming victory that I was expecting. But it did mean that the Union retreated across the Chickahominy, and it kind of ended the campaign. So, yeah, that's where we are. Let's get into it with turn 1 and A.P. Hill's attack. All right, well, A.P. Hill's opening assault did not go very well for them. Porter's, or Sykes' division here absolutely repulsed the advance by A.P. Hill. Routed, caused some casualties in here as well. You can see the panic markers where units routed. The Confederates did kill Burden here, which looks like it's like a sharpshooter rifle unit of some kind. It's only 1 strength point, so 1 hit was all they needed, and they did take it out, but it's not a big deal because, it passed its morale test, but it died. All right, end of turn 1. Easy peasy. I love this system for how breezy it is. So we got Slocum coming in from the southeast. I guess it's the southeast. I'm not sure there's a compass on here. I assume it's the southeast. In any case, we got Slocum coming in. We sort of repositioned along the line to protect our flanks. We're going to make Longstreet come through this swamp if he wants to take that hex and then potentially move down the line and shadow him as we do it. We've got interior lines here along this creek. Pretty strong defensive position for melee combat. And then over here, we have Sykes and AP Hill still going at it, some firing back and forth. Unfortunately, this artillery had no effect on Pender at point blank. We've moved McCall and some of his units. It's interesting, this division here, there's actually 2 different formations, but some of them can report to either commander. So as you can see here, Morrell or Porter. So some are reporting to Morrell, some are reporting to Porter. I guess, actually, scratch that. Porter is the overall commander. McCall is the division commander. Morrell is the division commander, but every one of these can also report to Porter if they need to. Anyways, Sykes is up here. Buchanan has kind of taken this frontal. He got really hammered this turn. He's taken this frontal position to just kind of protect this reserve artillery. I decided to fire with it instead of move it out of the way, but it was pretty good that I did because I routed some Confederate artillery over here, which is pretty nice. So it's back to the Confederates. We just rolled for Jackson's initiative, and he failed. So none of these 3 divisions are going to be moving this next turn. Well, AP Hill and DH Hill are doing a number on the Union defensive positions, made some great advances crossing these creeks and really getting into the Union's face, routing a whole bunch of these brigades. It was a real ugly turn. Down in the south, Longstreet actually found a way via a melee charge to get across Boatswain's Creek, and he is cutting into the south flank of Morrell. And it's not looking good. His units now have a way across. He's got the foothold. And they're going to storm across because they want to take this hex right here, force the Union line back. It's not the Union turn. The rallies also, the Confederate rallies were actually quite good this turn. They got a lot of their guys back. Union's going to have to get that same luck. You can see all the positions where the Union panicked and fled. We do have Slocum coming up from the south. They're going to want to be sort of the brick wall here that stops the Confederate advance if they can. This is not good ground in here. We're going to have to probably come up into these woods to try and get some effectiveness. But now that the Confederates have are chipping away at these good defensible positions, we may want to fall back. All right, well, the Union did what I asked, and they got themselves at least formed up and kind of somewhat reorganized, creating sort of a second line here as the Confederate advance is a little bit broken. It wasn't a super great turn, but we are winning. The Union is winning on casualties. They've inflicted a lot more to the Confederates than they've received, and we threw back Longstreet's beachhead here from Morrell. It was a Griffin's brigade, just a crazy amount of fire into that hex and forced them back, did a bunch of losses. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they're still in command, but he was thrown back. So the Union holding, it feels a little creaky, but as long as we can kind of retreat in echelon and fall back in echelon, I think we'll be okay. We're still holding this creek line in these woods. Strongest defensive position by far. I don't want to give that up. And looks like AP Hill and DH Hill are going to have to figure out a way to get organized there. But there's a big gap in here, so I expect a bunch of the units are going to come across in there. We've set up a second line of Union artillery and then a third line of Union artillery as soon as it gets limbered. We want to be able to keep our zones of fire as efficient as possible because they're able to cause big losses, especially as the infantry advances. So we'll see how it goes. We are going to get some more. We're going to get our last Union reinforcements this turn coming up from here. It's a couple brigades from Richardson, or the late Richardson. And not sure I'm going to put him yet. Sumner doing a good job forcing some units back here. It's going to be real bloody to the end. So for turn 3, what I thought I would do is take you through the different phases of the turn to show you how the battlefield kind of develops through the course of a turn, because that's kind of the one thing that's missing here when I'm showing you the recap of what happens. You're missing some of the drama of the advance and the routes and the rally and all of that stuff. So very quickly, we'll go phase by phase, and I'll show you just a brief glimpse of the board. And one of the things I like about this system is how you can see the evolution of the battle from turn to turn. So the Confederates are going to go first. They just did their command phase to check and see if everyone's in command. This artillery unit is actually out of command. It has some effects. They can only have its movement points, but it's going to need to move this turn anyway. What I want to do with the Confederates, with AP Hill and DH Hill, I want to drive in here, right? I want to try and get spear point as far into this open ground as I possibly can against the Union and force these defenders back off the river and put some pressure on them. We also have to roll at the start of the turn to see if what's his name? Not Lee, not Longstreet, Stonewall, Jackson, whether his divisions move. So 5 or less, and they don't. It's a 4. They're not going to move again this turn, so all of these 3 are still stuck up there. But that's okay. We're going to try and make some space for them to arrive. What else? Yeah, okay, so we did the command phase. Now we do offensive artillery fire, and then I will do the maneuver, and then I will show you where that ends up. So here we go. The Confederates have moved down. We've got D.H. Hill attacking Slocum's division, who's trying to break through on this road. We've got A.P. Hill, again, going to try against Sykes and part of McCall's division, who's, this brigade here in the north. And then we've got Longstreet down here, kind of flanking down through these swamps. We did cross again here into this woods hex. We'll see if Morrell and Griffin are going to be able to force him back again. But what we're trying to do is just stretch out this defense and find a spot to cross along here. This swamp is very tough, but there's not very many defenders, so we'll see what happens. We've also got Longstreet's artillery set up here, so next turn that's going to be able to bombard Butterfield. Just trying to thin out the Union defense. So we'll see what this impulse of attack looks like. And then, oh yeah, the one other thing I should mention is that our artillery reserve has moved down. They're trying to find position somewhere in here where they can fire kind of between the 2 divisions and put some pressure on these recovering Union units. Hopefully we'll find a breakthrough in here that will give them the opportunity to have line of sight in there. So let's see how this goes with the combat, and we'll come back and I'll show you how this evolves. Well, Union defense held strong this hour. There was a lot of ineffective Confederate fire across this line here, and the Union hit back, and it was pretty even, although the Confederates did even out the casualty count this turn. The Union taking a beating even if they're not fleeing. The only people who really routed were some Confederate units. One of Longstreet's divisions was forced again out of this here. It's Morrell and Griffin are really doing a number on anyone who approaches them on that section of the river. Further up, I wanted to try and dislodge here. We did a lot of hits to Warren under Sykes, but he still hasn't broken. I'm going to have to pull him out of there on the Union turn, but I was afraid to melee across there. I did melee, but again, he just took hits and stood, so the morale there very high. We did do some fire up here and did a melee against the dismounted cavalry that were there. They went this direction, and they caused a cascading rout with some of the Union artillery, so that did another hit. So in general, not as much of an advance as I think the Confederates are hoping for, but they did cause a lot of losses, so it's kind of a grinding firefight right now as we head into the Union turn. So here's the Union maneuver. We've gotten some of those rallied units from last turn back into position on the line. Still holding this river line. It's a creek line. I guess it's a creek, a stream. Yeah, it's a stream. So still holding that. We have sort of this... We've moved Slocum back to try and get a nice tight line here. We've got a couple of brigades coming up, including Meagher, who's going to be very helpful. Just still deciding where I want them to go. We'll see what happens on this turn, but trying to just form a perimeter that the Confederates can move into, but are going to be flanked by fire if they choose unwisely about where they move. So you can see kind of how the battle is moving and unfolding. We have to do the Confederate defensive fire, then the Union attacks, and then we'll be done with turn 3. Well, Union doing good work. This is the end of turn 3. As you can see, they chose not to melee, but as you can see, they are holding firm and actually forced Confederate routes along the main line of advance, and they are back up ahead in the casualty race by almost 10 casualties, which will be a big deal. One of the reasons I really like this system, big deal at the end of the game, one of the reasons I really like this system is because of the strength points. I like the strength point system here. You can really feel sort of the attritional nature of the battles over time, and you get the sense that, like, even though some units are routing and some units are standing, the standing, you can feel them taking casualties. And because you're keeping track of it down here and it's victory points at the end of the game, you can kind of feel the momentum of the battle as, assaults are repulsed and huge losses are taken, or defenses collapse and huge losses are taken. You get a real sense of, like, the army wavering or the battle unraveling for one side or another. And even though it's such a simple system, that sort of like psychological impact of gameplay is really neat. Jackson again, third turn in a row. Caught napping. Just twiddling our thumbs up here. Well, Gaines Mill's still going. We're heading into the 7 p.m. turn. Sun is setting over the battlefield, and it was a very swingy turn. Confederate side of the turn, they made a huge push. They actually managed to push the Union back. You can see all those defensive positions have been pushed back. Longstreet actually got several units through the swamp, across the creek there, and looked like it was going to be a Union collapse. You can see all of these retreated and routed units falling back from the line. But on the Union turn, they dug in, and there were a lot of brutal close combats in here. In fact, Longstreet and Wilcox were the target of 2 melees from Martindale and McCall. And thanks to Longstreet being there, Wilcox has managed to hang on and sit in these woods and repulse the Union, but he's taken a lot of hits. He starts at, 19? He's down to 10. So Longstreet's going to need to bring up some support. Thankfully, he was able to rally Pickett, finally. So Pickett will be able to get across here, hopefully. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Yeah, so Pickett should be able to get here next turn. He really needs him. He's a really good unit. Confederates just looking for purchase in here. I mean, it's been a grindy battle, and some of these. I mean, I think Seymour is still doing pretty good. He's still pretty big, but Warren, he's really ground down. The unit under Sykes, this brigade, is Lovell. He's been hit a couple of times. Buchanan here's got really high morale. He's been hit a couple of times. So AP Hill still trying to find a spot to break through. Confederate artillery this turn ended up doing a really good job. They were able to move up and support along this here. You can see that none of these units want to be out in the open in these artillery sight lines that the Confederates have set up. Their artillery line's actually in a really good spot. And then Slocum really paying dividends for the Union here. He counterattacked D.H. Hill's brigades as they were trying to come down this road. There was a vicious melee attack here with Slocum leading it personally with Bartlett. Managed to force back part of D.H. Hill's thing. So the momentum is kind of shifting here, and the Confederates at this point, I think, really very badly need to get Jackson into the battle. They are sorely missing this reserve manpower because right now the casualties are 52 to 40. So the Confederates are not on a winning trajectory right now, even despite all of the blood that they have been shedding. They just cannot dislodge these defensive Union positions. And it's looking like it's going to come down to really what happens. We're 2 turns from the end. It's really going to happen what happens on this turn for the Confederates, whether they can make a breakthrough somewhere and leverage that. So let's see if Jackson comes in this turn. He finally does. All right, so Jackson's divisions are going to be active this turn, and we're going to have to figure out where we want to put them. Maybe the answer is to bring Ewell down the center here where there's no resistance, and we've also got Winder. He can potentially come through these woods, or he can also come south, or he can actually come south and back up AP Hill or relieve AP Hill. And then we've got Whiting over here. So we're going to have some options as the Confederates this turn, and we'll see if it'll change the tide. It's getting real tight. Finish the 7 p.m. turn. Longstreet inching forward. Union counterattacks, keeping him at bay. At least he's got some of his good units over the creek line now. See if we can continue that on this next turn. AP Hill still struggling in there against Sykes. The Union kind of forming ranks in behind. We've got a big artillery duel going across this open ground here, both sides inflicting losses. And Ewell's attack here against Slocum, not as much power as or at least not the results I was not hoping for, given the power that I had, and it's kind of an even split there. Slocum standing in strong. He's really been an anchor, a rock back there for the Union right flank. And we probably need one more turn to get Ewell into position. Let's see if Jackson's coming in. He is going to activate again this turn. So yeah, we're going to be able to use all of the bonus brigades, we'll call them, under Jackson to make an attack this turn. So what we're going to do is slip Ewell's brigades down in here, I think, or maybe even attack the artillery, because it's causing us no end of problems. But we got to do something, because this is the final turn of the game, and we're losing in casualties, so we've got to do a big hammer blow against the Union here to stand a chance to win. Here's where we are going into the final Union turn on 8 p.m. The Confederates launched an all-out assault across Union positions with all the manpower that they could muster. One last heroic charge, basically, see if they could break the Union line. They did break a pretty significant portion of it. I mean, they've pushed back Morrill and McCall pretty violently. Slocum, one of his brigades is completely surrounded now after Ewell made a melee there. And Sykes is in real trouble. Union artillery is here on this line. The Confederates managed to close the casualty gap to a difference of 4, but the Confederacy needs to be +6 at the end of the game in order for it to be even just a draw. So the Confederates at this point, hoping that their defensive fire is going to be enough to keep narrowing that gap. They do have a lot of big brigades in some of these locations from Jackson's divisions that might be able to do some damage, so we'll see how it goes. Well, there we go. Battle of Gaines Mill is over. It was actually a pretty dramatic last turn. Confederates pulled ahead in the casualty count, sending some Union brigades a ton of casualties, but the Union in their maneuver phase kind of definitely fell back. The only guys they couldn't extract were here, Sykes's division, these couple of brigades, Buchanan and Warren, kind of stuck in here against the Confederates. So Warren could have withdrawn, but he didn't want to leave Buchanan surrounded. He wanted to keep providing support. So we took our chances in the woods there. Did not end up suffering too heavily. We had some artillery fire back and forth. The artillery is really what did most of the damage in this turn. You can see that Slocum has pulled all of his units back, and if this battle were to continue, you'd have Ewell, presumably if he's in command, coming down here. You'd have D.H. Hill coming down here. Basically, Slocum gave up the Union right to consolidate the defense. But I think at this point, with night falling, thered be a lull in the action. We'd probably get some disengagements. And then you'd have to imagine that early in the morning or even overnight, the Union would have withdrawn across the Chickahominy and given the ground to the Confederates. Ultimately, the casualty count, both sides over 70. Union caused 71 to the Confederates, 73 to the Union. That's +2 points for the Confederacy, but they did not take any of the key road locations near the Chickahominy. 2 points each for the Union, so that's 6, minus the 2 they're down here. So the Union wins with 4 points, a very, very narrow victory. Probably just on the other side of history, right? Because the Confederates won a narrow victory here as well. Probably similar margins. I think what ended up ultimately being the difference here was the hot Union dice for most of the game. The Confederacy went hot and cold kind of at key moments, but the Union tended to roll really well when it counted, especially. You can see Longstreet's division never quite got into the position that they were hoping. Strong Union defense there on the left flank for all of the game, all of the scenario. So this was very enjoyable. I am a big fan of this system. I know it has its detractors for being too simple, but I disagree. I think it's very fundamentally solid. Like I said, I like the way that the strength points make you feel the armies kind of wearing down against each other, and the effect that fresh troops can have. You're slugging it out back and forth, both sides are retreating men. You send a fresh brigade in that's got 20, 25, 30 strength points. You start rolling on the table in that regard, and you can really do some damage. And so it really reinforces the kind of attack in echelon tactics of the 19th century that I think are really important, and clever use of reserves and so forth. So I think it's a fantastic game. You know, I don't think Cedar Mountain, which I played last month from Via Victus, really showcases the system as well as this did here. And this is on the smaller end of scenarios for this system. You know, Antietam and Shiloh are massive affairs, but yeah, I thought this was great. You could get this done in a couple hours with someone face to face. A really solid gameplay experience, tense the whole way, interactive because you're rolling for your guys on each turn. You get defensive fire on the opponent's turn every turn, so there's never any downtime. I just really like the basic fundamentals Worthington has imbued into this series, and the 1.4 rules have really locked in the feel of the Civil War. The melee attack system I think is really great. A key, there were times where the Union used melee attacks at very key moments, like when Longstreet crossed the creek here, or when it looked like A.P. Hill was going to get his division into a striking position against the Union center here, and then a key melee attack back really forced them back. So you can feel the way that the close combats can swing the battle, and because you have to take defensive fire a second time, and the defensive fire is up a column, it's really risky to do. You're going to definitely take losses when you're moving in for close assault, which feels very right, given the range that you'd be fighting at. And yeah, I just think overall this is a really, really great system. It's so easy to teach and play. You're really just right into gameplay as soon as it's on the table and you've got it set up. I like the production value. These counters are huge. I think they're 3/4 inch counters. It makes it really nice. The hexes are nice and big. Use my hand for scale. And it's just a very solid, right? Very solid fundamental game. And I'm glad I picked up 7 Days Battles. It's got a lot of variety in it, right? There's a lot of scenarios, 4 maps that are all about this size. In fact, let me get out the other map that connects to this so I can show you the scenarios that you can link together if you wanted to play sort of like a larger, longer engagement. I mean, the turn track does go pretty far, and you've also got some night turns in there as well. There's some special rules for night turns. We didn't get any of those because the battle ended here, but yeah, let me set that up. So here's what the combined map looks like if you were to set up the scenario that starts with Beaver Dam Creek, play all the way to Gaines Mill, June 26th, June 27th, 1862. And then if you flip these over, you can link the other 2 scenarios as well, which is kind of cool. So you could have kind of like a larger, like over time engagement here. It'd take a lot longer to play, but it's probably pretty interesting to see how it evolves as you go through the turns and how the battle goes. You get the attritional wear down and what have you. So pretty large playing area. It's probably like an extra long war game map. Maybe probably about a little bit longer than a normal war game map, but about the same size vertically. So yeah, so you get a lot of value in this package, and 4 scenarios, 2 linked scenarios, and I think there's a what if scenario in here. So a lot to really enjoy with this system, and I think I'll be coming back to this one quite a bit. The Gettysburg game looks really impressive. I've heard some very good things about the Civil War Brigade battle series for Gettysburg. That one's a 2-mapper, 2 full-size mapper, I believe. A lot of counters in that one, but the scale on that looks pretty epic as well. And I think Franklin just came out like a week ago. So this is going to continue to be supported. I think it's fairly popular. And it's not super, it is light, but it's not super light, like a lot of Worthington titles. So if you're into the Civil War and you're into tactical games and you want something that's pretty playable without too much chrome on it, that still gives a really good feel for the period, then highly recommend Civil War Brigade Battle Series based on what I've experienced of it so far.